Hello everyone and welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you my experience of shooting both photo and video on the Fujifilm GFX 100S2 over the past month. This won't be an overly technical review. I'm going to assume you know the specs and details of the camera, so instead I'll be focusing on actual in the field use and how it performed out in the wild. Before we get started, I want to say a big thank you to Fujifilm USA who kindly loaned me this camera and lens so that I can make this review for you guys. No money changed hands. I already sent the camera back to them. They don't get to see this video before it goes live, and all of the thoughts and opinions in this video are honest and strictly coming from me based on my experience. All of the footage in this video, besides this talking head and the B-roll of the camera itself, was shot with the camera in 24 frames per second in 4K and f-log2, and all of the photos were shot in RAW and edited in Lightroom using my preset system, which is linked below if you're interested. I only had one Fuji GF lens to use, which was the 32 to 64mm f4, which is equivalent to a 25 to 51mm in full frame terms. I also ordered an adapter so that I could try using my Mamiya 645 lens, but I'll talk about that later on. Now, I couldn't just walk around my neighborhood with this thing, so I landed on a concept that would, in theory, push this camera to its limits, which is big sensors need big mountains. So we went to Canada. From Eastern Washington, where we live, it's about a 6-hour drive to the Banff National Park area, which is where we were staying for this 3-day trip. It was our first time visiting Canada, so we were pretty excited to be there during the fall, in the first half of October. It was pretty cloudy on the drive north, with the occasional gap in clouds that would light up the trees for a few moments. So far, I was really enjoying the camera and the way it handled, and I didn't notice actually much of a size and weight difference compared to something like the Sony with the 24-70, which is funny because it definitely is bigger. Side by side, you can really see it here, and it's a little heavier, but in real life and carrying it around outdoors on this trip, I didn't even think about it. It just felt totally normal, like it always would. And those of you that know me already know this is my opinion, but this screen design is my absolute favorite. It's the same as the X-T5. It tilts vertically and horizontally without having to flip out and rotate. For someone like me who doesn't vlog, I fully believe that this is the best design, and I was loving using it. As the sun went down, we walked around this beautiful lake and watched the light change. By the end of the day, I had a few more feelings about the body and ergonomics. It was totally comfortable. The little design on the grip not only looks great aesthetically, but it also is really functional and gives you a solid, secure grip. The whole system felt really balanced in the hand, even with the largish lens that was attached. The top screen for me was a bit strange. I would much rather have some of the nice Fuji physical dials in that space. I really do prefer that tactile experience, and I never found myself looking at the screen for any reason anyway, so it just felt a little bit like wasted space. And finally, I don't quite understand the decision to make the AF on button so small. I might be nitpicking here, but especially on such a large camera, it's by far the most used button on any camera that I use, and there's plenty of blank space here to make this more comfortable to reach and easier to find with your thumb. The Sony cameras, for example, have it much larger and protruding farther out, which is a better design overall in my opinion. However, these are really minor complaints and honestly just more of my personal preferences, but they're worth sharing, and I was surprised at how comfortable I was, honestly, overall just carrying and using the camera. The next morning, we woke up way before the sun and drove about an hour into the mountains to shoot sunrise at Lake Louise. We were hoping for decent light, but we had no idea it would be this good. We stood in the cold for close to an hour, just in awe at the different colors in the landscape, and I took way too many photos, but these are a few of my favorites. We spent the rest of the morning just walking around the lake and then driving back east a bit towards the town of Banff, sightseeing along the way. We had a horseback ride scheduled for that afternoon, so we grabbed some food in town, but then quickly left because it was just way too busy for me. I was miserable. Anyways, we walked around the stables by the horses and I took some photos while we waited. And this is a great example of where we should stop for a minute and talk about the image quality off of this camera. I mean, what on earth? This is insane. You can literally see every individual eyelash on this horse. And the 16-bit color is just so smooth and clean. I've honestly just never seen such clean, smooth, beautiful files. Even in higher ISO ranges, the files are insanely clean because of just how fine the noise is, like you barely even see it. So yeah, overall just really impressed with it. And they were an absolute pleasure to edit. They needed very little work to get incredible results. And to me, this is why you would buy into the system. Like this is, if image quality is your number one concern, I don't think you can get any better than this. I could zoom in like this on every image, but that would be excessive, obviously, and you get the point. But yeah, I'm just absolutely in love with the files off this camera. They have a unique look that is not easy to describe. So anyways, I took this camera on horseback, which was a hilarious decision because using this camera one-handed isn't easy, let alone when you're bouncing around the woods on a horse. But I took a few crooked photos for memory's sake, and now I know better. Later that night, we drove back out into a different area of the mountains to try to escape the crowds at some lesser traveled locations. Unfortunately, we hit a traffic jam along the way, but it didn't last too long. And we ended up driving these dirt roads for the rest of the night and had a nice evening taking photos, even though we were kind of in the shadows of the mountains and not where the light was directly hitting. I'm not too proud to admit that we snoozed one too many times the next morning and almost completely missed an incredible sunrise at the spot we had planned. We made it with about a minute to spare before the color was completely zapped away and it just turned gray. I like the frames I got, but man, I was kicking myself that entire drive. I really would have had a great morning of photography if I would have just got up a little earlier. From here, I really wanted to get on foot in one of the small towns in the area, so we parked in this town called Field outside of Yoho National Park and walked the streets for a little bit. The fall vibes were in absolute full effect in this little town. One thing to keep in mind with this camera is that it could impact your workflow a bit, particularly in post-production. The raw files are huge. They're beautiful, but they're huge. For example, a 128 gig card held just under 900 photos for me shooting in a lossless compressed format. With the file size being so large, this also means that you need a pretty powerful computer in order to process these files efficiently. I am running a MacBook Pro with the M2 Max chip, 96 gigabytes of RAM, and a 38 core GPU, and my Lightroom catalog for this trip did run slower than usual when doing things like switching between images, zooming in to check focus, stamping out dust and spots and such. And these were stored locally, even on the internal SSD, not on an external drive. It wasn't terrible, but it was genuinely surprising given the age and power of the computer. As far as video capabilities are concerned, I must say I was expecting a little bit more, even though this is not a camera that's designed to appeal necessarily to video shooters. I did a bunch of different tests with all the different codecs, both the long GOP and all eye compression types, and I had essentially the same result all the way around. The footage is fine, it just looks a bit mushy. I'm not sure how else to describe it, but it is not my favorite. It almost looks like there is some type of noise reduction happening in camera, even though I had all those options turned off, just like I have in all my other Fuji cameras. But no matter what I did, I couldn't improve it. It just kind of is what it is. It's still passable in an online space like YouTube where the video gets heavily compressed anyways, but it's not ideal. And this, for me, is one of the largest downsides of this camera from a hybrid standpoint. The colors and process of grading it though was no issue. Everything was great there. I'm not sure what's going on with the video quality, but I'm guessing it has something to do with the fact that it's taking so many pixels and shrinking it down to a 4K resolution in the pipeline before it gets to the SD card. Although I can't say for certain, I'm not that smart. But I'd be curious if the more video-centric GFX 102 maybe has any improvements in that department, especially since it can shoot closer to the native full resolution of the sensor at 8K. As you can tell from the last scene out at the glacier, the camera is very much weather sealed and it was rock solid in those terrible conditions. It was windy and rainy and crazy, and it had to be one of my favorite locations of the trip because there's just something so fun and rewarding about being out in the extreme, like challenging conditions like that. And I'm really happy with the images I was able to get. On the last afternoon of our time in Canada, we hit some of the popular spots and did some scenic driving. Eventually, we ended up doing some hiking around the Peyto Lake area. And let me tell you, being in bear country, grizzly bear country, is pretty nerve-wracking. So when we heard a noise in the woods off trail, we both got pretty startled for a second until we turned and saw this deer staring right at us in front of the view of the lake. I wish the lighting conditions were better for this shot, but it was a pretty surreal moment nonetheless. I wanted to include this portrait of Jillian because it's an example of how my adapted Mamiya 645 lens performed on the GFX. It is the 55mm 2.8 lens, which on the Mamiya system is equal to about 35mm focal length. On the GFX system, it's significantly tighter, closer to around like 45. Here I shot wide open at 2.8. It looks perfectly sharp and the rendering is really nice. This is a great system really for utilizing old glass if you have some nice lenses in your collection. Before I share my thoughts about the autofocus performance, I want to quickly talk about the sponsor of today's video, Skillshare. When it comes to learning any new skill or brushing up on your knowledge of an old hobby, it can be pretty intimidating to know where to start. Skillshare is the largest online learning community for creatives, with thousands of classes led by industry experts across film, illustration, design, photography, music, and more. Yes, you can even learn the basics of what this big blinky thing is that sits behind me in the background of all my videos. But whether your interests are as obscure as mine or not, Skillshare is full of amazing classes, some of which are even taught by people I know and respect in the industry, like fellow photographer and filmmaker Kyle McDougall. I honestly cannot think of a better person to teach you how to shoot your first roll of film. I wish I would have had this available to me back when I started, but let's not focus on how old I am. What I personally think makes Skillshare stand out is the value and the flexibility to learn so many different skills with just one subscription. You can try your hand at new things and see if they resonate with you or not without investing a ton of time and money into doing so, making it easier than ever for you to land on something that actually gets you excited. For me recently, that has been Marquez Brownlee's class on YouTube success, covering how he scripts, shoots, and edits his videos. As you may know, keeping up with a YouTube channel is way harder than anyone ever told me, and I'm trying to get better about that. If you're interested in trying Skillshare, you can get 1 month of access for free. The first 500 people to use my link in the description will receive a 1 month free trial of Skillshare. Thank you again to Skillshare for sponsoring this video. After our trip to Canada, we had a short stay booked on the Oregon coast for Jillian and our friend Rachel's birthdays. They're very close, so we just did like a double dip trip. I brought the GFX along for one last outing. I didn't shoot any video, but I did get some of my favorite photos from the GFX here, so I wanted to include them while I talk about the elephant in the room staring at me. No, not that one. Autofocus. My biggest concern going into this experience was the autofocus performance. Even for those who own and love GFX cameras, they're usually not shy about admitting the fact that the autofocus is pretty far behind other systems still. So I was skeptical on how it would perform. I mainly use single point autofocus because of my usual subjects being landscapes or mostly static scenes, so I didn't think I would be affected by it. And for the most part, I was perfectly happy on the Canada trip using this method. However, when I switched to AFC here on the beach to take photos of the dogs, I have to be honest, it struggled. You've seen me do this with the X-T5 and such as well, but it was pretty frustrating this time around. I even asked specifically for the 32 to 64mm lens because it has the faster linear motor, and I must say, for anything moving, it's unfortunately just not a camera I would choose. I tried a ton of different autofocus settings and nothing really seemed to help much. The thing is, it does grab the dog's eye on the screen and displays the green box around it, apparently tracking it. But the hardware, it feels like it just can't keep up with what the software is seeing and doing. I was shooting in plenty of light. I had the shutter speed at 1/1250, even tried closing down to f8, and I got maybe 2 or 3 out of like 30 images that were actually in focus, which was kind of a bummer. A lot of times it just got lost on their tail or on their back foot. I can't say I'm surprised by this. It's not what a medium format camera is necessarily designed to do, but from a photography standpoint, it is by far the biggest and kind of the only real con of this camera. How often would it impact me personally? Well, it depends, and this kind of leads nicely into my closing thoughts about this camera. You see, as a personal camera for me, I don't need incredible tracking autofocus most of the time, which is why my X100VI is just fine. But that's my preference because of the size, price, and convenience. With the GFX, you get the best image quality and colors I've literally ever seen in a comfortable body design that comes in at a higher price point, size, and weight. The choices do make sense. It just comes down to your use case. If you're not shooting street, sports, or wildlife, this thing is gonna be hard to beat. If I was purchasing a camera for the art side of photography, where I'd be mainly using it for landscapes, still life, and portraiture, this is what I would get. It's incredible. But there you have it, my full take on the Fuji GFX 100S2. I was sad to send it back, and if I'm being honest, that does not happen very often. Pretty bummed. As always, if I left one of your questions unanswered, please feel free to drop a comment below. Thank you so much for watching, I truly appreciate it, and I will see you in the next one.